Hey everyone, I am so happy to do another interview here on the podcast, and I'm very pleased to welcome Alli Earnest here to do an interview. So, Alli Earnest is the author of the Gate Chronicles series, a no spy science fiction series that she likes to describe as Rogue One meets Pride and Prejudice. She likes writing epic fantasy books within sci fi worlds. Alli grew up reading and rereading her favorite fantasy books, as well as dreaming of the day she'd write her own. When not penning or typing her next novel, she can be found buying too many candles, playing various sports and board games, and doing life with her husband and two kids. So, welcome, Alli.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course, I just love following you on Instagram, and that's where I discovered
Thanks.
your book. And I just gotta say, your book cover is gorgeous. Like, it just
Thank you.
drew me in, just seeing the two characters, the setting, it like just told me exactly like what I would get. And then,
Perfect. That's exactly my goal.
yeah, exactly. I love that. And then you are like a master marketer. I don't know. Like, I am terrible at marketing my books, but like, I love seeing like the reels that you do and just
Thank you.
the, anyway, it just gives me like the excitement to read your books.
All good things. All good things was my plan.
All right. Well, I can't wait to learn more about you. So tell us a little bit about where writing started for you and what your journey's been like.
I've always been a reader, which most writers will obviously say that. And that's true for me too. I remember loving English in school and creative writing. I wrote to be honest, they were rip-off stories in like second grade. I remember specifically there was one we had to write. I don't remember exactly what the prompt was, but I was like, wonderful. I'm going to write a story called Pizza Land, but we had just read Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. So it was like a complete ripoff. Food was falling from the sky. Pizza, specifically, I love pizza, fell on the school and you can go to school. And I remember thinking, this is like top art. I was like, oh my word, I'm going to be an author one day because this is going to get published. Little did I know, like, I was heavily influenced by what I was reading at the time. And like in middle school, I wrote, we had journal time in school. And so I remember writing like epic, sprawling fantasies revolving around Greek mythology, because that's what we were studying in school at the time. They were very bad, but I mean, I was in middle school. I was a middle school teacher. I read my students' stuff. Some of them were very, very good, and some of them were on par with my middle school stuff. So, I get it. I get it. But once I got to high school, I got really into Harry Potter. And I mean, I reread those books, I don't even know how many times. And I discovered fan fiction. And so I started writing really bad fan fiction. And that was kind of my first foray into like people actually reading my writing that wasn't for a school assignment. And, people can be brutal. So that kind of toughened up my skin a little bit. And then I took a writing class in college. And it was also really brutal because you'd sit in a room with everybody and you'd present your stuff. You couldn't say anything. Someone else read your story or your poem or whatever you brought to class that day. And then they would just tear it apart and you couldn't say anything the entire time. So, like, through all of that, I decided I really did want to be an author. I really enjoyed that process and I really wanted people to read my work. And so I wanted to write books that I would like to read. And that's kind of how I fell into it. And so after I finished college, I really got into being serious about writing and actually trying to write a book, a full length novel, not a short story or poem or anything like that. And here we are, two books published later, and I'm working on the third. So it's pretty exciting.
That's so exciting. I love that. It sounds kind of like I was like paralleling it to like, is that a word? To my
Oh, yeah.
journey. Because like I wrote a little bit in high school, but then I didn't start getting serious until after college and then went on to publishing and all that. But I what stood out to me is I think it's great that like you still wanted to, share your books with other people even after getting so much critique
Oh, my
feedback.
word. Yes.
Like it sounds like you got a lot of brutal feedback and then like how you said that you had to just keep your mouth shut and just let that would be hard because I
It
feel
was
like
so difficult. You could
yeah.
like write things down, but you couldn't even like ask questions or anything at the end. People would like write on it and they would hand it back. And then you just silence. And
Oh
I
my
mean, it was really
goodness.
good training, to be
Yeah, I'm
honest.
sure because it's like we're have critique partners and beta readers and yeah, wow. Because like a lot of people, I think they would like take that experience and be like, I'm never gonna write. That was terrible. But I love that you have that perspective. So was there I know like while writing fan fiction that helped you build some tough skin because of all the
Mm.
feedback you're getting. But were there moments that you kind of felt a bit down that you wanted to give up, or what helped you to like still have that desire to have other people read your books?
Honestly, it wasn't until I was actually trying to like publish and I was working toward I decided to self-publish after I got some feedback on I sent my book to a developmental editor because I was thinking I was like I know it needs work because I was trying to query at the time and I was like I know it needs work. I'm going to go ahead and just give it to a developmental editor, pay them and then figure out what I want to do. And the more while it was with her, I did a lot of research on self-publishing. And I realized like I love my characters, I love my world so much that I wanted to self-publish. I want people to read it. I don't want to have to wait years for that to happen. So that's why I decided to self-publish. But in that process, once you decide to like, okay, people are going to read this in the world, people are going to pay money to read my book. You have to finish it. And that's the point where like I need to finish it. And it got really difficult because you're like, I have to edit it and you have to re-edit it and edit it and edit it and edit it again and again and again. And there were times where like just like, is it even worth it? Because I'm having to rewrite this section 7 times. And so that's kind of probably my lowest point is just figuring that out. And then once I decided to self-publish, that I ended up getting pregnant and having a kid. And so I published my first book when my little baby was 6 months old. So I trying to figure out how to like publish during that time was really rough because it was like early mornings or, you know, any time that I had a little bit of nap time, I would get on my computer and write or edit or upload something to whatever site I needed to. So that was hard, but it was, that was probably the lowest part. But I did it. I did it. I got through it and it was
Yeah.
worth it in the end.
Yeah, I love that you maintain that desire to just, this is really important to me and I want to do it. So I love that. All right. Well, I love that journey so much, and I can't wait to hear from your words a little bit more about your book. So you wrote Cities of Smoke and Starlight, and what I can you first tell us a little bit about what it's about?
Yeah, so I basically like to describe it as Rogue One meets Pride and Prejudice, but I recently started doing it as Rogue One meets The Mummy and Rogue One meets Anastasia, and I try to find little things like that that people can really relate to. So basically, it's a sci-fi world, kind of like Star Wars, but it takes place on a singular planet. And then you have lots of heavy fantasy elements and tropes that, because I love reading epic fantasy, so think of like epic fantasy Rogue One style plots in a Victorian-esque world, essentially.
That is amazing. And I feel like
Yeah.
it's so unique when you're talking about in your journey, like writing that book with like pizza and falling from the sky, and how it was and how a lot of what you read was very influenced by what you read. When I was reading this, I was like, wow, this is so unique and
Thank you.
so different. And I think what I love that about it that was so unique is that it kind of was like a blending of different genres. You have it's like steampunkish and sci-fi-ish, but also fantasy and historical. And I just loved the way it all blended together. I thought it fit really well. What was your inspiration for kind of mixing those genres together?
I was tending to write a space opera to begin with. That's how it started. And I was like, I'm going to have these two characters racing through the stars to save time. And it ended up, I was like, that's going to be too hard for me at the time. I don't think my skill level was at that point the way I wanted to write it. So I was like, what if I put it on a singular planet and, go from there? And that's kind of how I started out with it. And then I started adding a couple different elements because I was a middle school teacher. And so I used to teach the Odyssey. And so I kind of wanted to add that element in there. And as I got to just brainstorming and like working on these characters and working on this world, I realized that I really wanted to have like a, a sepia toned element to it. I know that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I wanted to be like, this is like old timey feeling. Like I love Pride and Prejudice. So I added that kind of element in there. And so just working through it, and I was like, well, I know when I'm writing this, even though my world feels more sci-fi, I have those heavy, I pretty much read exclusively epic fantasy. So I know those tropes are in there. I know those storylines are there. But with that, but I decided to kind of call it space fantasy because I thought I made it up. Apparently I did not. Spoiler alert. But I was like, oh, I didn't realize there's actually other books like this. And the spectrum of those books is like really wide. You have more like mine, you have steampunk, and then you have like more like space operas. Mine is a really good mesh of those because it's kind of hard to describe it. That's one reason I had trouble querying because I was like, I don't even know how to describe my book. Is it science fiction? Is it fantasy? It's really a good, healthy dose of both. And so
Hmm.
having to choose one path was really difficult. And I was like, never mind, I'm just going to self-publish it. I'm not
Yeah.
going to worry about that.
Yeah, I feel like the mesh between like science fiction and fantasy is kind of like a hard thing to balance. Like I remember like
Yeah.
about a while ago, my first novel was like a science fantasy, like another world, but they were coming from Earth, kind of like yours. How like, you know,
Yeah.
these characters come from Earth, but they're coming to another planet. And it is a weird mix. It's like, how do I market this or how do I query this?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's one thing I did. That's what I tried to do with my cover and my title. And my title, I tried to title it like the fantasy style, like the Court of Thorns and Roses, because that was really popular at the time, and it still is kind of popular. But my cover, I tried to say, okay, this is steampunk, but it's not really steampunk. It's I kind of like tried to marry those in that way, but it's really hard to market, to be
Yeah.
honest, because people are expecting a medieval fantasy, and I love medieval fantasy, but I wanted something slightly different. That's what I
Right.
wrote. And I'm like, guys, it's just like Star Wars, but not.
Yeah, which I feel like you've done a great job with like the whole marketing because
Oh,
like you
thank you.
how you talked about like Rogue One meets like Anastasia or Pride and Prejudice and then you show like how they could all mix together and honestly reading it makes sense. I could totally see it.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I think you've done a great job with that.
Yeah.
Um let's see. So, a lot of your characters, you mentioned that you studied the Odyssey, taught it in middle school. Did you teach it in middle school, you said?
I did. I taught eighth grade. So I did the
Okay.
Odyssey. I did a bunch of different things like that. And I miss that part. I miss the teaching the fun like elements like
Yeah.
that.
So, yeah, that was my next question because a lot of your characters, they're very familiar with the Odyssey and Shakespeare. So, I was wondering like what your knowledge was behind that, which you taught it.
Granted,
Um
it was an eighth grade level, so keep that in mind.
yeah, yeah. Well, did
I
you
didn't have to
take
dig too deep.
right. Did you have to take some of what you studied like from college on that or high school? Was there more research you had to do when writing the book?
When I was writing the book, I didn't really do a whole lot of extensive research because when I started writing the book, I was still teaching, actually. It was my last
Okay.
semester teaching. So it was kind of really fresh in my mind. And basically, what I did with cities, because I loosely inspired it by the Odyssey, um, was I took elements that Odysseus faces in his book and I tried to add those in a fantasy way that fit my book. So, for example, the stone statues that come to life and attack the crew in Cities of Sweat Starlight. That's based on the Lastrygonians in the Odyssey, that the man-eating giants essentially. And I was like, oh, that'd be a fun element, even though it's not really the same, but it was like that kind of vibe where these, killing machines are going to destroy your crew, just like Odysseus faced. Or I did have a scene with a prophet, essentially, that was kind of the blind prophet Tiresias in the Odyssey that tells Odysseus he's going to have to face this, this, and this, and do this and whatnot. I ended up cutting that one because it didn't really add to the story, essentially. It
Hmm.
was one of the bigger scenes that I cut in the final draft or whatever. But I used that as a heavy influence, and I loved teaching Shakespeare. I loved Romeo and Juliet and Julius Caesar are my favorite. So I love teaching that, but I didn't want to go too deep into that. But I thought Hallie would be somebody who would just use the words to like in her daily life, like Shakespearean insults. I think that was kind of fun element to add to her character and make her kind of quirky. So
I love that. That is like
thank you.
that's like amazing that you got so much inspiration from those classics and you're able to put it into this novel and have it like woven in with the plot. Like the Odyssey, like is very I could see very influenced
Thank you.
with like their character development and all of that. And was there like any other inspiration that came in, like your process for doing that?
I don't know if necessarily inspiration like that. I try to add like little Easter eggs. So there's like a couple lines there from different things. Like there's several Star Wars lines kind of peppered in or nods to Star Wars, not really necessarily lines. But like for example, Case hates sand, and there's just one scene where he's like, the sand is like disgusting and crunchy, and all I can think about is Anakin.
Yes, that's
And I was like,
exactly what I thought when I read that.
good, that was the purpose. And so I try to
Yeah.
add like little tiny Easter eggs like that. So book two has more pop culture references than just like the classics. But book two is based more, I say based, very loosely inspired by Frankenstein. where
Okay.
I'm not gonna spoil anything, but like there is a element of, creating some kind of monster essentially. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. With book three, I'm kind of loosely basing it on King Arthur. So it's kind of
Mm,
like I wanted those elements to be there, but they're not as heavy-handed as book one, to be honest.
yeah.
But it's
That
there. There's little nods to it, but more pop culture references. I think I do have I definitely have a huge blatant Star Wars one in book two, but there's also Tangled. I forgot to put that one in there, nod to Tangled. A reader pointed out, they're like, is this inspired by? I was like, oh yeah, I forgot I did put that one in there. So the different things like that. That was really fun to use that. But I was able to do that because it's a sci-fi. The world that we live on, it was, people are still using this as their knowledge and basis. And that was really fun to weave in because of that. If I did like a high fantasy world, I couldn't do that,
yeah.
which is fine. But like it was fun to add that kind of stuff in there.
Yeah. Yeah, and totally makes sense. And then you mentioned the Shakespearean insults, and that goes right into my next question, which is around Hallie and Case's banter. Like the banter is written so well.
Thank
The
you.
Shakespearean insults were so creative, and it just made me wonder, like, how did you do it? Like, because I feel like I don't know, maybe it's just me. I feel like I'm terrible at writing banter, and I don't know,
Oh,
like what
please.
like I'm just wondering, like, do you have like a process or like where do you get inspiration for writing banter? Any tips?
That's a good question. I was like, I don't actually know, but now that I'm like sitting here like thinking about it, my sister is really good at quick quips, and like my sister is hilarious. She's very dry humor, and so I have a little bit of dry humor as well. So that's why I like to write too. I like to have fun. I like to have like little teasers and little bitty twists and whatnot. But my sister's hilarious, and so maybe my sister has inspired me this whole time because she's really good at banter just in daily life.
Yeah.
Um, but both my sisters are very smart and like very quick on their feet. And so maybe that's what's inspired me. But like honestly, like the media I consume, I really like witty banter. So that's why I started doing like Anastasia and The Mummy and different things like that have that banter. I started comparing my books to that because like, oh, like the media I consume has really just helped me with that. And plus I just kind of enjoy it. I like being particular, and like maybe my middle school background has helped because those kids don't have no fear of anybody, and they will
Yeah.
tell you to your face that the sweater you're wearing is straight up ugly. And so you have to be on your feet. You have to come back with those quotes and be like, well, you know what, you're stuck with it, sorry, I like it. And so
Yeah.
maybe that's also inspired me, I don't know.
Yeah, I feel yeah, that makes sense because like inspiration comes from various things. You don't exactly know pinpoint exactly what it is, but like paying attention to those conversations and like
Yes.
the media you consume. Yeah, that makes sense. Totally. What have you found to be your what has let me rephrase this question.
You're good.
What have you found to be your favorite parts of writing this book and the most difficult parts of writing? And it maybe doesn't have to be writing per se, it could be publishing, author life, either one.
Honestly, the easiest part, I really like revising. And so I enjoy going back and making it pretty. And sometimes that can be difficult because you have to rewrite a whole paragraph or a chapter or a section of the book. In book three, I've already had to rewrite something because I knew like I wasn't going to keep whatever it was. So I rewrote a whole arc for it. But that's probably the hardest part and the easiest part. However, marketing is actually really difficult for me. Um, I'm really excited that finally my marketing is paying off. However, I was basically throwing spaghetti at the wall for a very long time, just kind of figure out what works and what's going to appeal to people, what's going to make people want to purchase, what's going to make people want to share my reel that I made. That's kind of what my thinking has been because I send my husband tons of reels, and I was like, what about them makes me want to send them to my husband? They're funny, or they're emotional, they're memorable, and so I try to bring that into my marketing. But figuring that out is really difficult because you don't know exactly what's going to appeal to most people, even though you think you know your audience. You just kind of have to keep trying, and so that grind is really difficult sometimes because you have to be consistent and do it for a really long time. And then I have two young children; they're 2 and then 9 months, and so finding time to actually write and market and do stuff, it's really difficult. So I have to find little pieces in my day to make it work, but I do. But it takes a lot of hard work to do so.
Yeah. I'm sure I'm about to have a baby next month and
Well,
I oh
congratulations.
thank you. And I'm just like thinking how am I going to balance writing and mom life? But I mean,
It's fun. You'll find a way.
thanks. Um But yeah, marketing, that's true that it does take some time to be able to find what works for you and also what works for your readers, like what grabs their attention. And so, yeah, I can definitely see that being challenging, but like I said before, you've done a great job. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, what is one piece of advice that you would give to anyone writing, like writing in general, and then one piece of advice you would give to someone who's an aspiring author?
Just as a general audience, I would say that you write what you love, write what you're going to and what you're going to enjoy because you are going to read it several hundred thousand times. And so don't write for the market. Write what you love. If great if like, the market is hot for that. But you can find a way to market it. You can find a way to find readers because there are readers for your book. As for new aspiring authors, you just need to finish something. Once you finish something, there's like a switch that has been flipped in your brain and you pretty much finish a lot of different things after that. That's what I've discovered. I watched a YouTube video when I was working through my first book. Cities is the first book I wrote, or third book, sorry, the third book I've written. I wrote two others before that, and they are dumpster fires, but I finished them. And I remember watching this YouTube video when I was working on that first one saying that, I don't care what you do, you just need to finish the book. Either you bring in a new character, you set something on fire, or you put your character in a tree, whether that's literal or figurative, just finish it. That's all that matters. You can dump that book in a fire pit after the end if you want to, but just finish it. And like that is the best advice I had ever received because once I finished that first book, it was just something like, oh, I can do this now. I can finish a book. That book is terrible and it's only about 49,000 words as an epic fantasy, but it won't see the light of day. And that's fine. That was just my practice book. So that's okay.
I love that advice. That I can relate to that so much because it's like once I finished my first novel, that gave me the confidence to feel like I can do this again. And
Yes.
in that book is not going to see the light of day at all. But yeah, it does give you that confidence like, hey, maybe I can do this. And it's okay that if it doesn't like see anyone or
Yeah,
and no one sees it. It's a practice novel.
exactly. And maybe one day I'll go rewrite it. And that's what I keep telling myself. But I'm like, right now, it's going to have to be a complete rewrite.
I've thought that too. And I'm like, do I really want
Exactly. It's kind of like, I go back and forth.
to? All right. Well, let's get into some rapid fire questions. What is your favorite trope?
Lost or hidden air, whether that's royalty or
Ooh,
not. I love that trope so much.
I love that too. Do you like it when it's like kind of revealed at the end of the book or kind of or the beginning
I
or
prefer
throughout?
it at the end. However, I don't mind going in knowing it's going to happen, but I like seeing when the characters or it's revealed at the end, whether I know it's at the end or not.
Mm, good to know.
Either way, I just like the characters to not find out till the end. That's
Yeah.
my perfect. That's my preference.
It's a nice little plot twist, like
Yes,
cliffhanger.
yes.
Yeah.
Because though the anticipation was like, oh, they don't know that she's the actual princess. Oh my word, this is going to be so exciting. And I love it. I love it.
Love that. What is your favorite writing beverage slash snack or snack?
Oh, coffee, 100%, as most people.
Yeah, definitely.
Snack, I don't really have a snack. I like coffee, but I like sweets. I like fruit. I mean, I'll eat anything, but coffee, I have to have coffee when I write.
Just gets you going.
Yes, I love it so much.
And what is your favorite book currently?
I don't know, but I will say my favorite books would be the Stormlight Archive. But I, mm, Michael J. Sullivan's Right Year Revelations books, those are they always compete. Like, some days I'll say that one's my favorite, and some days it's Stormlight. Either
Yeah,
one, but I love those, all of them.
I really need to read Michael J. Sullivan's books. I think I've like commented on your post, like, because I remember you talking about it, and I'm like, these books are sitting on my shelf right now, and I just need to read them.
You
So,
do, you do. They're so good. It's like accessible Lord of the Rings. Like I like Lord of the Rings movies. I don't like the books as much. I did teach The Hobbit, and I was like, why? But it's like but I love the movie so much. And so I'm like, yes, but this like Michael J. Sullivan's books, I feel like they're Lord of the Rings because that kind of world, that kind of
okay.
vibe. But it's written in a way where it's a little more accessible than there's no like 6 page description about trees. So like we're very thankful for that.
That's good to know.
Sorry to all the Tolkien lovers out there, but I do like Tolkien. I would could have used a little more editing.
Right, right. That makes sense. All right, well, that gives me some motivation to pick up the books really soon. What are you working on currently?
I'm working on book three right now. I'm in the throes of the first draft. It's been a while since I've drafted anything. I drafted book two, the first draft, back in 2020 before I had kids. And so I was just editing, revising for a while. So it's been a little bit of a challenge to get through book three, but we're making progress. We're making progress. I've also started brainstorming my next couple projects. So that's been exciting. That's kind of what motivating me is like, once I finish this, I can work on the shiny new thing.
Yeah.
So, but mainly book three.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait for that. And then where can readers find you?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram, which is Alli Earnest Writes. And also my website is alliearnest.com. I have a newsletter that I send out relatively monthly. Sometimes it's quarterly. Depends on when I have news. That's when I send it out.
Awesome. And we'll have links to all of that
Oh,
in the show
perfect.
notes so our readers can check those out. And thank you so much, Alli, for coming
Oh,
on.
thank you for having me.
Yeah, I had a blast talking about all of this. And I don't know, I feel so inspired whenever I talk to authors. Just like, oh, I'm ready to like go and write that book. And
I
it's,
feel that.
yeah, I love that. All right.